Okay, agenda item 3, declarations of interest, please.
Yes, Chairman, could I declare that a member of the IFCA, Chris Thomas, is my brother-in-law, and I'm a hobby fisherman.
Chris?
Yeah, obviously Steve Watts, my brother-in-law. I've got two brothers who are hobby fishermen, and I also do a bit of fishing myself.
Right.
Mr. Chair, commercial fishermen, and may I also ask for guidance when we discuss payments for lobster tagging. Should I keep quiet, or as it will directly affect me?
I'll ask the Chief Fisheries Officer.
As it's a pecuniary interest, I would advise not to make any input to that item.
Okay.
It's a very small one.
Yeah. Right. No other declarations. Agenda item 4 then, to confirm the minutes of the IFCA 17/15 to IFCA 29/15. Are there any questions on the minutes? Can we have a proposer that they're a correct record?
I propose the correct record.
Second. Those in favour? Thank you very much. Urgent items. It's not an urgent item, but I'd like all members present here now to know that I've proposed a change of time for the next meeting, if we're all in favour, from 9:30 from not 9:30 in the morning to a 1:30 meeting in the afternoon on the 24th of September. Yeah. Are there any objections to that? No. Right.
So I wonder, Chairman, if the members want a reason. Well, the reason is because the Chairman and I get back from London that morning, and in case there's any delays in flights, or we will be delayed, but at least we can get on the boat and be here by midday.
So we're all made a note that it's 1:30, yeah? And there's no other items I've got. So we'll move on now to part 1, requiring a decision, or agenda item number 6. The audit, and Diana's going to take it.
Yeah, I'm going to take the IFCA annual return and audit. As a small body, we're obliged to do an annual return as part of our accounting statements, and you'll see that within here. And if you turn to page 14 of your agenda pack, that sets out where we are financially at the outturn of last year, so last financial year, which is 14-15. So you can see that actually last year went pretty well from a financial perspective, in that we've managed to put aside somewhere in the region of 13,000 back into, I think it's 13,000 back into our reserves, and which is for a new boat or whatever the committee decides is the right thing to purchase, and that we've done very well out of income and extra receipts, and I think that that's something we need to build on, because as funding gets tighter and tighter from DEFRA and our parent bodies, we're going to have to make our own income. Now, that's largely been working for large-scale, for the Kia project, for the BT guys when they bring the cable in, those kinds of things. But I think there's more that we can do moving forward, and that's something I think we need to work on, especially as we get an awful lot of interest coming in around the area of marine renewable energy, and I think there'll be lots of opportunities for us there. There's nothing I think that's outstanding or is complex, but if you've got any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Any questions from any members? No? So the recommendation is the committee approve. The proposer for that, please. Seconder. Those in favour? Passed. Thank you for that, Diana.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 7, the future of IFCA funding. Just a note here now, I'll just point this out. Steve is not the maritime officer anymore, he is the chief fisheries officer. So that is his true and full title. So I'll hand over to Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have an update actually on this report, because the Chairman and I were in London on Tuesday for a quarterly meeting of the association at DEFRA headquarters, and of course the item of future IFCA funding beyond March 31st, 2016 came up, because each of the 10 IFCAs is in a similar position. Some of them not quite as sensitive as us, or rather fragile as us, because 88% of our income to run the service for the year comes from the new burdens funding. And so, well, as you probably know. So let's move on and to see the update. Well, Sam Evans was there. Professor Sam Evans was at the meeting, and he gave a presentation. He's the head of DEFRA's Sustainable Fisheries and Marine Planning Division. He said at the meeting that a cut of 83 million has already been announced. That's to DEFRA as a whole. This is before the comprehensive spending review. And that amounts to, I worked it out this afternoon, 4% of its 2.1 billion budget. And he thinks a cut of around 120 million is more likely. So not good news on their front. Interestingly enough, euphemistically, he announced it as an opportunity. Well, I suppose you could call it that, but it's a big drop in funding. They're already working on preparation for further drops in funding. And his very words said there is less money and a clear downward pressure on resources. And interestingly enough, he explained that the marine sector within DEFRA is an unprotected area of DEFRA's funding, unlike food and farming and flood protection, etc. That is more or less protected. But fisheries or the marine side of things isn't. He admitted that the fisheries are a very small part of DEFRA, but that doesn't take into account the amount of added value. And he mentioned Cornwall in particular in that context. It's estimated, he said it was estimated that fishing produces about 0.02% of the annual GDP. So you can understand why it's regarded as quite a quite a small area of DEFRA. Farming produces 3%, that's just as an example. There are huge regional differences, he recognised that, but he also recognised that IFCAs are on a downward slope because of pressures from DEFRA, the MMO and local authorities. It's been recognised that DEFRA's revised approach has made significant effects on budgets and time allocation. He finally recommended that we wait and see, this is the IFCAs he's talking to now, to see what the Chancellor announces. It's worth noting, incidentally, that local authorities have imposed cuts on their levies to a number of IFCAs. In fact, every IFCA has had a cut in their local authority levies since investiture 4 or 5 years ago. For instance, we suffered a cut of 38% in the last 2 years. We started off with a levy initially was 0, and then it was reintroduced as 23,000. That was then reduced by 10% to 20,700, and now for this year it's 14,275. So there is quite a drop. And 3 estimates of a drop in the new burdens funding, because that's what funds us. At present, we get, as you know, just under 110,000. A 5% cut will mean we'll get 104,500, 10%, 99,000 a year, and 30%, which is the extreme end of a cut, 76,700 a year. And following the forums meeting that the chairman and I joined, there's always a directors meeting just open to chief officers. It follows the members forum, and as I'm a director of the association, it was talked about then, and the general feeling was that we must expect less new burdens funding post April the 1st next year. So it's gloomy, but it's not terminal. And if you do look at the percentage drops, we can continue the service with some reduction from the new burdens funding. Admittedly, some things would have to be trimmed and adjusted, but however, I'm sure we can carry on. Which brings me really to the resolution that a working group is set up to. We don't know what the results of what the Chancellor was going to come and say at the moment, but once we do, I put in the resolution or the recommendation to form a working party to address the issue of future funding for the IFCA, because there's no point in waiting till March next year and suddenly find we're about 10% down or whatever. and then think what we're going to do. At least we can be prepared well in advance, 6 months or more in advance. I think the comprehensive spending review is due in September, but there is another 100-day review coming before that, and DEFRA have already been told they've got a cut of 83 million, and it possibly be slightly more. They may not cut us at all, but I think we will have to suffer something. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Is there any questions arising from what Steve said? Because I didn't think there would be any, but I wonder if anyone's got any. No? So the next thing then is to set up a working party. I'd like to propose Robert Francis. Have we got a seconder for that? Yeah. Are there any other members willing to go on this working party?
I'm assuming you'll be on it, Chairman.
I'll be on it automatically. I'll go on it, yeah. Are there any other members willing to go on it? Requests? We need one more, really, then.
I think it would be useful if it was one of either the MMO or English Nature and Natural England. It may be that they only call in, but I think having somebody from outside will help us focus on what they see as our key objectives from the DEFRA family. Because I think otherwise the risk is that we will concentrate on what we locally think is really important and maybe forget what's important from our sponsoring bodies.
I would suggest we leave one space open then, because they're... Right. Is members happy to go along with that? And that should make 4 plus the IFCA staff, is that correct?
Yeah, I'll be. Well, obviously I'll do the reports, Chairman.
If anyone else wants to come on, just let us know, and you can be welcomed aboard, I'm sure.
Well, right. Chairman, that is the beauty of a working party. It's up to the chairman, which I assume would be you. You can invite who you'd like along. So it's flexible in that sense.
Right, so we now have a working party, which we'll have to arrange a meeting and move on with that. Right. Agenda item 8, raising the IFCA's profile locally. I'd like you to hand over to Doug and Daisy.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. All right, so with helping to raise it locally last quarter, what we've done is we've gone to the school. We've spent a couple of days at the school and spoken to each and every class, starting from the red class, going right up to year 11s. We've broken it over 2 days. So the first day was focusing with the primary school, and the second day was the secondary school. So with the primary school, we actually were in contact with each class, and they were able to tailor what they wanted into their curriculum. And so we brought the touch tank. We were able to talk to them about marine life cycles, parts of crustaceans, pollution, pods, stuff like that. And they with the touch tank, they all had to go at handling lobsters and crabs and stuff like that. On the second day, speaking to the senior school, we brought in like our side scanner and our underwater camera, and we were able to tailor that to their scientific classes. So speaking about like sound waves and acoustic pings using side scanner, they use that in their science lessons. So we were able to tailor that for them, as well as we brought the touch tank in. We had more species available on the second one. We had crawfish, we had velvet crab, we had a lot more variety. So we were able to go through that with them as well. We've also had interest from the school with the Rolls-Royce Science Prize project that the school entered a couple of years back. They'd like to get that up and running, re-enter it again, and they've asked us to assist them with that. So we're meeting with them next week to start organising that. That comes to no cost to the IFCA. They're just helping. We're just helping with advice. They'd like to work alongside us with any sort of research that we're looking at doing. They're just going to help us tag along with that and adapt it and use that for their application for the Rolls-Royce project. And then so going forward with that through the year, with the raising the profile, we are going to be going to the fetes and festivals, as has been mentioned in the past, so that's going to be around August time. And we had a really good response from all the teachers and students from the school that they've asked us to come do it again next year. And especially with the second half in the senior school, we're going to sit down and do a more in-depth one, so really tailor it for them to more detail. But so that's in a nutshell.
Are there any questions from any members regarding the report? Yeah. As I said in the previous meeting, education is a good thing, and I think you're doing a good job on that side of it. Thanks to you both for that.
We had a lot of good feedback from parents as well, so that was positive.
Good. Right, so we'll move on then to 9, the fisheries activity report. Over to Doug again.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Okay, a couple of points. So training, we've gone up to pool, we did a side scan training along, that was spearheaded by CFAS. So that was quite good. That was more, the previous training was more deployment, recovery, more hands-on, where this one with CFAS was more processing data, software use, and getting the maximum out of that, which was quite beneficial. So that was IFCA nationally that attended that. So with that, what we've been able to do is we've been working with Kia on the key extension build, helping them to side scan that. We've been dealing with someone called Jim Poulton. So we've been carrying out works for them. Moving on to patrols. We've done some various ones, some after-hours ones, some weekends ones. So we've come across a lot of commercial, or hobby as well as commercial. Generally, it's been well accepted. We haven't had to issue any pace cautions. But what we did notice is there's been a lot more hobby gear pots being pulled per string. It's not like 1 or 2, it's 3 or 4 hobby, especially on the back of St. Mary's. So it's just something to keep in note that we've been discussing in the last few years. Moving forward to that with the tagging, with a bit of an update, what we're looking at doing is we're getting a lot of tags out there, but what we're still sitting at a benchmark at about 10 to 12% return rate. Sitting down with the Marine Biology Association of the UK, they use 40% as their benchmark for data sampling. So we're trying to elevate that, and by doing that we've proposed to MMO Newcastle, who is running the EFF scheme, that we change the funds around a little bit, offer more reward, take for the actual tags to try and engage more fishermen. We are seeing a lot of lobsters being landed that are tagged, that are oversized, but they're not reporting it back to us, whether they feel that £2 isn't worth their time, so not too sure. But you'll look, for example, the Marine Biology Association, when they did a study from skate and that, they offer a reward between £25 and £50 depending on the animal, so it's a big markup. Obviously we can't offer that for lobsters, it will just wipe out our budget too quick, but we can with the data storage tags, because there's only 16 of them. It's not like we're going to be getting them back every day for the rest of the season, so we're proposing an increase to £50 per animal for that, and so what that will be is £50 for the tag data, and then, £25 for the tag data, then £25 to re-release that back into the wild, so we can still continue to see the movement of that animal. Because those tags, they actually are glued on, so to remove them, re-glue them onto a new animal is quite a bit of effort. So, and then moving down to the stream of tags of the spiny lobsters, we have tagged just over 90 crawfish, and we haven't seen one return for that yet, so that's why we're marking that up to 25 pounds. In saying that, we have got more vessels in our fleet now. We have Neil come in. We have Colin Jenkins that's moved towards more netting than in potting as previous years. Colin Jenkins, did I say? Sorry. And we've got Wayne that's also going to be netting. So I'm not too sure about Mark Pender if he's going to be doing. So we've got a few more netters out there. So hopefully we can get some sort of return on that. Because as you can see, our profile, our letter of acceptance, we budgeted for 9,500 for charter hires, but to date we've only spent just under $1,000. And for tag data returns of £2, we budgeted 2,000, but we've only spent just shy of 250. So we're still waiting on MMO to come back to that. They're quite slow up there to get the process rolling, but hopefully they agree to it and approve it. And once they do, we can move forward with that. And also, what we're looking at doing with the spiny lobsters is doing a behavioural study, seeing interaction between spiny lobsters and European lobsters to see if what we're looking at doing is conducting in a controlled environment. It's going to be a tank with a mesh dividing the animals. They'll have some sort of habitat to hide away in, and we're going to put some bait out. And whether the crawfish can sense that the lobster is about, whether they'll come out and feed or not, just sort of see what sort of is there, because we have such an abundance of lobster over here, and we're just seeing if that is impacting on the spiny lobsters. And another thing is the nursery grounds with the MCZs. We're looking at, so we've got 2 proposed sites at the moment that we're going to be starting next week, and then we'll be moving those around. And the 2 we're doing next week is the Crim and the Daymark, the 2 MCZs there, and see if we can identify any juveniles within those MCZs. So, yep, that's...
Any questions from any members? Okay. Right. We could hear you.
You're not on, do you?
It's just for the recording, if there is one going.
Is it a recording? I apologise. If you're having an issue with MMOHQ, if you let me know who you're in contact with, and I will engage on your behalf.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Doug, you might find that on a couple of the points, I think that comparing the lobster tagging returns to the mainland, it's one of my pet subjects, I know, but having recently been and seen the activities on the mainland, I think because the activities there are in a lot of areas are necessarily much more concentrated. In other words, that they haven't got the endless habitat that we've got here, that they're likely to get a higher return. I think that's a kind of natural thing anyway that's going to happen. And I've seen the concentration on some of the areas like off Plymouth and that of pots that I know you've got a few up the shore of St Mary's, but we don't get. And the other point is that I've got a number of photographs of crawfish and lobsters living in the same hole, seem to be quite happy side by side.
Really? That'd be quite interesting if you could pass those on.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask how much you were planning to spend on this behavioural study, because to be honest, I think you're wasting your money.
Behaviour study isn't much. It's like we've got a tank the tank's going to be DLF have got big bins that they let us borrow for 2 weeks. It's only going to be running for 2 weeks. It's a webcam, some old bait. It's using the house. We've been told to make like a habitat for them. We've been in contact with what do you call it? National Lobster Hatchery. They've said just use old tiles, sort of. You don't need to spend much money. It's not going to be anything. Go out and get some bait. I think the cost is going to be minimal.
From our anecdotal evidence, and my own, I'd say we'll get lobsters in pots with crawfish.
It's more
go in the same pot.
Yeah. It's more with the lobster tagging. It's sort of a question: is that a possibility? It sort of answers one of the questions to our tagging, so we can rule that out and say, no, that isn't a direct impact of it. So we know the answer for that. It's not a question.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't think lobster concentrations would affect tagging crawfish because they're different grains on the whole.
Yeah.
You won't get crawfish where you get big concentration of lobster because they're too shallow.
Yeah.
Crawfish will be deeper grain, but historically you would catch them. You would catch them on the same ground. They would live together, as Tim has already said. So I don't think you'll find
the study is only going to take 2 weeks maximum. So it's not a long running thing, but it's just something that we can tick the box with wrapping up the tagging project, saying it be a question that can we say that has been answered.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? No? All right, we shall move on then. We shall move on to agenda item number 10, which is buyers and sellers, and I'll hand you over to Doug again.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So, since we've become an IFCA committee and we've been working with the MMO on the RBS, so the buyers and sellers, working quite closely with them with visiting on St Mary's premises and off-island premises. We've noticed a dramatic increase in compliance with that over the last few years. Currently we have 23 premises registered under the RBS scheme, and they seem to be compliant to that. The ones that aren't, we do have a database for the people that are not registered, so we're able to monitor them as well to make sure that they are staying true to what they do. And in all fairness, they use either the people that source out to Celtic Fishing Game, or they just they're buying in frozen from somewhere else. So, but what you will find is they might say sold or brought locally, but by definition it's like, I think you can pull Cornwall into that, so it's a bit grey area on that. But what we have done is we haven't needed to give anyone any official written warning yet. We've given, in the last couple of weeks, we've needed to issue a written rebrief just before, because we've visited the premise. They were advised that they knew that they were buying. They were advised that they needed to do, and they haven't. So we followed it up with another inspection, which led to escalating up to a written rebrief. Hopefully they do comply with this and realise that it's not going to go away. Otherwise, that's got to step up another level. But all in all, we are getting very, very good responses from that, which also goes into one of the selling points that I say to the clientele, or the premises owners, that it protects the commercial fishermen. It stops that backdoor sale of fish, and it also lets you promote your restaurant as buying local. So they do get given a certificate, and they can put that up in the window to prove that they are sourcing that locally from commercial fishermen straight off the boat. So it is a good marketing point of view from them, and it also does protect commercial fishermen as well, which a lot of restaurant owners are quite happy to do that.
I'd like to thank you for your work done on that, and what I will say to you as chairman is keep your eye on it, keep on top of it.
Yeah.
All right, because that's good work that's needed to be done.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions regarding that? No? Right, we'll move on then. So we'll move on to Marine Biological Association, and I'll hand you over to Daisy. Gotcha.
Bear with us a second, guys. Sorry about this. Got a PowerPoint to show you.
Shall I take 12 a minute more? That's what another. You can move on to that one. Because it's not much to do, is it?
want to do the next one.
Yeah, was members happy for me to move on to 12 a minute? Steve could take this item and hopefully we can get the technical side sorted. So we'll move on to 12, which is a draft induction paper of the new IFCA members. I'll hand you over to the Chief Fisheries Officer.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think this is standard practice. Well, I know it is standard practice, not think it is, amongst the, the other IFCAs. But because we're so small and we've only got 3 MMO appointees, it's never really occurred, I've never really seen it as a priority. But, however, I think it should be done. So, anyway, what I've put together is a draft induction paper. And can I underline draft because I've already changed it. For instance, I've added another paragraph to the end of the background section, which is on the first page or second page, really. The background. I've added a paragraph to the end because I failed to mention the fact that the IFCA is a member of the National Association of IFCAs, which meets on a quarterly basis, and the Chief Fishery Officer is an appointed director of that, and also that I'm a member of the Chief Officers Group, the COG, that again meets quarterly. So I've added that paragraph to that section. Also added a paragraph to the end of the conservation part, which is a couple of pages further on, because I didn't mention the Marine Protected Area Working Group, which we formed in 2010 to work on the MCZs, and now we've expanded it to include the MPA, the Marine Protected Area, and it's an explanation there. It doesn't consist only of members of the IFCA, but it's also other sectors of water users, such as anglers, divers, inter-island boatmen, conservationists and bird watchers. And the group still meets quarterly to discuss conservation matters, or it should do. We didn't meet today because we didn't have time to put an agenda together, but that is the plan. So there's an extra paragraph added there, and I also feel, and I haven't written it yet, right at the very end, there should be a finishing paragraph which repeats the sort of opening part about the welcome, and hope you'll find the work with the IFCA interesting and so on. So, they're my amendments, and of course it is a draft paper, so it's open to any other suggestions. I think the way forward actually is for me if I send out the new induction paper, the second version 2, if you like.
Version 2 don't give out read.
Members can come back with any additional comments to that, and then eventually, by the next meeting, we may have a definitive document.
So we're not going to approve the papers at the moment then?
Well, in principle, Chairman,
right.
The idea that in principle, I think is really the resolution that we should have an induction paper. I think it's essential.
Can we have a proposer for that then, please? Colin, sorry.
I look forward to receiving it.
Right. Have we got a second and a proposer? Yeah. And those in favour? We'll move forward with that then. Wonderful. Thank you. Can we go back to agenda 11?
It's a blue. You have to crawl under a plate, don't you? Oh, it might be able to reach. Yeah.
It's on the other side.
Hey.
It takes a second.
This is designed on a different laptop, so I'm sorry it's a bit out of sync. So last month, Doug and I went to the Marine Biology Association of the UK, and we met the 2 members of the staff there, Dr. Stephen Cotter, who does a lot of tagging studies on wetfish like skates and rays and things like that, and Dr. David Sims, who's sort of a really expert guy when it comes to sourcing funding and things like that. So these guys heard about us just via sending out volunteer emails. So So that's really good. That sort of points out how much interest that we're getting from other organisations. And what they offered to do is to give us 16 of these data storage tags. So these ones are dead, so don't worry about dropping them. But if you want to pass them around and have a look.
We've seen them before, you've seen them.
Could you turn that mic on and just turn it to the face?
Better? Cool. So these are CFAS G5 long life data storage tags. They've got about 2 megabytes of data memory on them, and they've got a battery life of about 2 years. They're worth about £325, and we're getting 16 of them for free. So that's really, brilliant for us. Something that we probably wouldn't be able to afford with our current budget anyway. Yeah, like I said, you can drop them, it doesn't matter.
So these are the ones that you're
Yes, exactly the same as these ones.
Yes.
Yeah, these are the ones Doug mentioned earlier that we'll be paying £50 for. How they work is they record the temperature and the pressure of the surrounding water column, and then from that we get a big, long set of measurements that we can use to pinpoint the animal's location. You can set them to take measurements at specific time intervals, so say every minute, or if you want to do a longer term study, you could do it every day or something like that. We're also going to be getting a receiver tag, which will be put somewhere in the middle of the islands, probably St Mary's Sound, and it does exactly the same thing, but it just gives us a stationary fingerprint of the islands. So you can use that data to pinpoint where your animals moved around. So that's all coming from the MBA. We're not paying for any of that, and the MBA are also going to process the data for us, which is brilliant because we just don't have the software. Yeah, of course, go for it.
I'm intrigued by the fact that the pressure and temperature measure sets the position of the animal. So almost like a GPS coordinate.
That's what the signature, the stationary receiver is for. So that will measure the same thing.
And what range?
What range?
From the signature.
It go down. It works off that as the pressure, and then they will drop out at 200 metres. So if it goes deeper than 200 metres, it will flatline until it comes back up.
So I mean, even if it's 100 miles away, it'll still give you a position.
The two tags aren't talking to one another at all.
No.
They're completely separate.
So there's no range on it. So
as long as you don't go off the continental shelf, we know where it is.
The same tags we use to put on skates to go from Wales to Ireland and back on migration. So there is.
It's not like an acoustic tag. It's not sending to satellite or anything.
No.
It's just its own little measurement.
Clever stuff. Right, thanks.
No worries. Like I said, we didn't plan this. This was just something that has been offered to us that we're going to take advantage of because it's brilliant. So our aims are sort of a bit wishy-washy, really. The tagging data for crawfish isn't great at the moment, so hopefully these will be able to supplement that. There's a lot of thought about these onshore, offshore migrations with the crawfish. They reckon they come onshore at the start of spring and then migrate offshore again during the winter months. Locals know about it. Tim, Nick, you all know about it. It's in the literature. If we can, get some solid evidence for that with these, that'd be brilliant. There's loads of local enthusiasm to see the crawfish fishery back. Every fisherman that I speak to really keen to do whatever we can to help it out. And the results from these, be they positive, negative, or completely non-existent, will sort of give us a good idea of what to do for future studies, whether we need to do acoustic tags, which you can follow the crawfish around. That's literally like tracking it. So, or whether we'd carry on with these or whatever. So hopefully that will give us some ideas.
So can I ask you, how much would an acoustic tag cost?
They're a lot more expensive. The difference between them is acoustic tags work. You have buoys around, so you'll have a geofence. So if the animal moves outside that geofence, you lose all data. As long as they're moving within those buoys.
So you have to set up buoys.
So you don't have to recapture the animal to get that data. It will have live feed, so you'll know at every single point where that animal is.
But you have to put your own buoys down.
Yeah, have to put their own buoys down.
Does that make it hugely expensive?
Yeah. Where those are a lot cheaper and they have no range, they can go anywhere. But
I was just thinking about this 9,000 budget we haven't used, but that wouldn't even look at it, I take it.
No. You're looking at about, they did a study up in Newcastle and you're looking for 1,000 lobsters, 40-something grand.
Yeah, okay.
So where there's no range on those, the only downside is you have to recapture them.
when you say 1,000 lobsters, 40 grand, I take it 100 wouldn't be 4 grand because the setting up cost is big, is it? Yeah.
No matter how many lobsters you've got to have
You've still got the 40 grand.
You still got to have the buoys and the...
Okay, thank you.
Obviously, you have to recover these to get the information back, but the actual data quality is better than acoustic tags. So we've been told. We're by no means expert in these. So it's not very good, I'm afraid, but this is what it will look like on the animal. So that's about the sort of size animal that we're looking at. They'll be glued on with Loctite 3090 glue, which is veterinarian grade. So shouldn't do any damage to our animals whatsoever. They're going to be double tagged with our streamer tags as well. So if we recapture them and this is still attached, job's good. And if we recapture them and it's not, we know that they've knocked it off somehow.
What happens when they cast?
Sorry?
What happens when they cast?
When they cast, we lose it.
You lose it?
Yeah. The idea is we're going to get sort of larger...
Yeah, that cast less...
Yeah.
Tagging the right fish.
It'll all be explained, don't worry. Yeah, so these ones are inert. They're not taking any measurements. They're dead. They've been used. What we're going to do with these in the next few weeks is get some animals and glue them on and then watch them for sort of 4 or 5 days in the store pot just to double check that the glue that we're using doesn't induce molting or any other adverse effects. It's very unlikely that it will, but obviously if we put 16 of them in the water and they all shoot them things, then yeah. With regards to animals, we're going to ask Tim for his help. He seems to be able to know these crawfish backwards. We're also working with, the local guys that target crawfish quite a lot, that we've got quite a good working relationship with anyway, to get our animals from. And larger male animals that are less likely to molt throughout the summer period. But we will be hedging our bets with this. So if we just look at our timeline. So meeting in May, that's passed. Coming up into June and July, we're going to do the trials with the broken tags, just to make sure that it's not going to induce molting. And then throughout the summer, the plan is Dr. Cotterell's going to visit us in August when the crawfish season is well underway. He's going to bring the rest of the tags with him. And what we're going to do is get 16 appropriate animals, tag them all, calibrate the tags to record sort of a very regular intervals, so maybe a minute, 5 minutes, whatever Stephen thinks is the best. And then hopefully, with all of our publicising this to the general public, we'll get recaptures. And then every time these animals are recaptured, you don't have to remove the tag, but what you do is you connect a cradle and then download the data to a laptop. And then obviously return the crawfish and hopefully it'll be recaught again, and that way we're going to build up a data set. So in theory, if that all goes to plan and we've, had recaptures, come sort of November, December and the end of the fishing season, when it's sort of likely that the crawfish will move offshore, we'll recalibrate the tags to take measurements maybe every day or every 2 days so that they can stay on the animals over winter, and then hopefully if we get them back in spring again, we'll have an idea of where they go over the winter, whether they go off the continental shelf or stay in the islands or whatever. Obviously, it's all a case of getting the animals back before they molt.
Going back to the August there.
Yeah.
Dr. Stephen Bolt's over for 2 weeks, marine biologist.
Yeah.
Might be worth having a chat with him as well while he's here. I'm sure he'd be interested.
Dates, or?
We can find that out and let you know, but I'm sure he's doing a bit of diving with Tim as well, so it might be a good time to...
Stephen Cottrell is very keen to go diving. Can I give him your number, please?
Yes, the sooner the better, actually.
He's going to be over second week of August, we've penciled in.
Okay, yes, the sooner the better. A couple of things. The idea being was that when I originally spoke to Doug about this, was that so that you've got some chance of getting some of them back, and this is a little bit of a theory, the idea was that we go and someone trains us how to glue this thing on, and we go and get one of our so-called pets, which are places that we know come back every year, bring him up, put the tag on, take him straight back where he's meant to be, and hopefully not having disturbed one of them too much, there's at least a chance of getting one or two that you can then pick up the following time and do that, so that rather than a little bit of a chance, we might sort of go somewhere where I know where they are and pick them up, glue them on that day and stick them straight back in again, put them back in their hole again, and hopefully they're not too disturbed, and see what happens.
Could I... Sorry, I would reiterate that, because if you catch animals in nets, the survival rate would be a lot worse too. Some of them are badly bruised in a net. You wonder about the shock and so on, whereas if Tim can pick them up, put them back, I would suggest Tim does all of them if it's possible.
You're asking a lot from me there.
Well, I don't know. But
I said I'd do a few for Doug and Daisy.
We were just doing it so it was just hedging our bets. We have a higher probability with return with Tim, especially if he recognises one coming back each year, than opposed to some of the fishermen out of the Western Rocks. But if we can get a recapture of that, then that's good from the Western Rocks. But yeah, it's not trying to put all our eggs in the one basket and try and get something back.
I mean, we're not funding this, but obviously we want to do everything that we can to make it a success.
The other little bit of advice I'll give you, because these are going to work the same as the data loggers, they will have an optimum time that will make the battery last 2 years. For example, our data loggers, we could record every minute. If we did that, the battery only lasts about 4 months.
Yeah.
So there is a time that will work best for you. So you need to ask them to find that out, because they can sometimes be set on default, which won't suit you.
No, Stephen and David are experts in these things, so we're going to use their advice with regards to what we set them to. All we're doing is gluing them on animals. We're not even getting the data, like processing it or anything. Did you have
could I ask one more? Yeah, please. You talk about putting on big males. Are you going to do any females?
Not this time around.
Because will that be representative then? I mean, I don't know about crawfish, but my guess is that big male lobsters behave very differently to hens.
It's the same sort of theory for crawfish. The only reason we're using males is that the females will be molting to mate, and obviously that increases the risk of losing it.
But even big ones, when you get 4-pound hens, how often do they molt?
Who knows? With this sort of beginning pilot study of it, we're just doing everything we can to get them back. Yeah. If it's a success, then grand. We want to look at smaller ones, female ones, male ones, buried ones. But at the moment, we're just sort of using what we've got. That's the cradle, so the animal will still be attached. You put the tag in there, just attach it to a laptop, download the data, it will take about 2 minutes, then the animal will go straight back in where it was captured. So it shouldn't be too distressful for them. That's just an intact tag. I don't know if any of you looked at these, but their connection points are completely corroded. That's what a new shiny one will look like. And one of the final points from our meeting after discussing this project was the potential of getting an Interreg project going. Interreg is the European Interregional Cooperation Fund. It's funded by the European Regional Development Fund, and basically they just they don't want anyone to reinvent the wheel. They want partner countries to work together to solve the same problems that they've had, to save people doing twice the amount of work and share knowledge and all that kind of jazz. They suggested IFCA, who've done loads of research on this species. The MBA are going to coordinate all this for us, so they're going to get in touch with them and liaise with us and sort of make things happen, really. It's all in very early stages, so I can't really give you too much information on it. But we could literally look at anything with this. We could go into population genetics, the acoustic tags, the hatchery. Anyone know David Fletcher up in Wales? He's looking at raising crawfish in the same way that the National Lobster Hatchery does. He hasn't had much success, but we could help him out with that. Plankton dispersal survey, just seeing whether eggs that are hatched in our seas go over to France or Africa or the Med. And Interreg's all about community involvement, so getting fishermen, stakeholders, school, the tourism industry, everybody involved and excited about it, which is really cool. The area they've suggested looking at in France has got a similar fishery to us. I believe they're doing a bit better than we are with regards to populations of crawfish and things. But yeah, like I said, very early stages. The proposals are expected in sort of late autumn this year, but the MBA are coordinating all of that, so that's as much as I know, I'm afraid. Any questions?
We discussed earlier today about the French success, particularly because they had buy-in from their fishing community, and it was the fishermen that were actually leading the sort of the regeneration of the population. And I think I mentioned last time that they had a no-take between sort of January and May, which is obvious. But in the later part of the season, sort of August, September, they were returning buried hens back to the water to make sure that they had the opportunity to release the eggs, and so they would kind of float around, in a group, as I'm told by the scientists. And that has seen a significant increase. I couldn't give you the figures off the top of my head, but they must have data, and perhaps it may be to a point where they're above a level of sustainability that perhaps we could then sort of, have them give us buried hens, not us, but you guys, buried hens to populate the waters here.
It's all an option. I mean, the purpose of all the projects that we're doing is to get management measures or something along those lines that's going to help our populations come back again. So that's what all this data is leading to at the end of it. And obviously if they've done things that have worked really well, then we can use them and sort of have a bit of evidence that it's worked beforehand, which will help.
Absolutely. And then comes an IFCA bylaw.
You never know. Any other questions?
Just one more thing. One thing that we're noticing is we have a lot more management measures for for lobsters than we do for the crawfish, nationally and locally. Like we have a bylaw for our minimum landing size is 90. Where nationally we have the V-notching scheme, but with crawfish we don't have as many management measures as that. So one of the things we are also looking at is there some sort of equivalent to V-notching that we could do to a crawfish, because we believe that it's very difficult to V-notch a crawfish, but is there something that we could do locally that could identify a breeding one or a buried one that would stay in like a V-notch for a couple of molts to help recover the species? So that's sort of we do have a very abundant lobster population, and we do have a lot of management measures in for it, so it'd be nice to sort of see a few more management measures move it over to the crawfish.
If anyone wants to read up on Inshore,
Right, before we finish, I'd like to thank you for a very professional presentation. It was good. Thank you for doing that. Right, we'll move on now to 13 and 14. I'm going to ask Rob Seabold, could we swap these round, Rob, and you do, please, can we do the update, Natural England update first, and then you go on after to your verbal presentation? Is that possible yet? So...
Okay, the Natural England update, there.
No. Put the light there.
Yeah, you've got the update in your pack there. There's not an awful lot of change on this from last time, but I will take you through. I suppose the most significant change is item 2.1, which is, sadly, I'm leaving Natural England, so this will be my last IFCA committee meeting, which I am genuinely saddened about. I've really enjoyed working with you all. It's been a privilege and a pleasure. I suppose in terms of arrangements, obviously I was only sort of sitting in for Kate Sugar, who will return when her maternity ends, which will be around about April next year. And in the interim, one of our lead advisors in the area team, Devon Cornwall Silly, Joanna Smith, will take over as the Natural England appointee. I believe some of you know Joanna, previously Joanna Doyle. So she actually sends her apologies that she was unable to attend. We tried to get her to come along, obviously, sort of a handover continuity point of view. But unfortunately she had some family commitments this evening. So, yeah, that's, I suppose, the main update. But, yeah, I wish you all well. And it genuinely has been a pleasure. Some of the sort of more regular updates, survey work, we've spoken about these items of survey work before. The drop-down video survey, final report for that is still pending. I chased that the other day, but still not forthcoming, so once it is, then we'll release it to you, Chair. The digital aerial seabird survey, that has started now, the field work. The first overflight was on the 12th of May, with 2 more planned over the summer. The all-island breeding seabird survey, that's RSPB led with obviously Dr. Vic Heaney leading that. That's underway also. Natural England is sort of part funding that project, but RSPB leading. The lobster and crawfish tagging project that you've obviously heard an awful lot about. We were really pleased to be able to contribute a small amount of funding to that project. We do think it's really valuable and important work, and yeah, very happy to support that. Conservation advice package update for the Isles of Scilly. I reported last time that won't be started until 2016 and is scheduled for publication the following year. That said, Natural England is committed to providing any bespoke conservation advice that the IFCA needs to make the assessments under the revised approach. So as long as we continue the dialogue, we're certain we can meet any requirements that you have. And casework, not an awful lot happening. Obviously the Harbour Quay extension work continues. We dealt with a licence variation on that, which is all about the revised method statement for the containment of the contaminated sediments, and I believe there's a further licence variation in at the minute. I don't know any further detail. And we had a request for from the Council for the Isles of Scilly, a temporary pipe and pumping arrangement at the desalination plant on St Mary's. So that's in with us at the moment as well.
Tim, you got a question?
Yeah, just while I remember about that. Are we talking a gap point here?
Yeah. Is it? Yes.
Yeah.
On the far east of the island.
Yeah, where one of the plans came out, I was extremely concerned at what was going to go on, and I made some suggestions through Neville as to where they could avoid a problem there. Basically, there's a problem for both people where it's going to come out. Number one is that they were going to stick it out right in the middle of where the sunset corridor.
Sorry, did you meant Craig Dryden, not Neville Gardner?
No, Craig, sorry.
Sorry, that's good.
No problems, Craig, yeah, sorry. Hang on a minute. Hang on.
We're just starting to get worried.
And they were going to stick it right through where the pipeline where one of the main sunset coral beds were, which is just like, I twitch at that. And the second point is that where the intake was going to be is probably the most silty, dusty place in the island, and they're going to be cleaning their filters from now till Christmas if they put it there. Because every time there's a storm, they're going to be sucking up endless amounts of... I just thought I'd pass that on to you, because I have tried to pass it on their way, but I'm not 100% sure that I'm getting through on that.
I mean, obviously we don't have any remit to advise them where to put it, but we will be looking carefully at where it's proposed to be, because it is within the MCZ.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could I just say, just an addition really to 3.1, the SAC monitoring on page 45 at the bottom.
Oh yes, sorry.
The CFAS survey, that's still going on. In fact, the endeavour is over next week on the 14th to finish off some drop-down video survey in the northwest, just inside our EMS, what is known the IVMS 1 area.
I wonder if that's the same survey or a different survey.
No, it is the same, because they didn't finish it last year because of the weather.
Okay.
They've done the southeast section. That was okay, but they've got a bit to finish on the northwest corner of our EMS.
That's why we haven't seen the report yet.
Yeah. Well, they're here on the 14th.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve.
Amanda?
Yeah, just to take up Tim's point about the pipes. Did you email Craig, or it was a conversation with him?
I've had several conversations. He asked me for advice in the first place, but then he asked me for all sorts, and I told him I need more details before I could give advice. But later on, he sent me a map which was very small, but it looked on that map as though it was sort of wrong for all sorts of reasons.
Okay. Well, can you do me a favour? Could you just send me an email with those the basic points. I don't mean an essay, just so...
No,
and
okay.
I'll take it up with Craig tomorrow just to make sure it doesn't get lost.
All right, thank you.
That'd be appreciated.
Tim, I was just going to say, Craig's passed a more detailed chart on to me, if you want me to pass that on to you, of exact intakes and stuff like that.
If you could send that to me, and then I'll answer Amanda then. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Have we got any more questions for Rob on the agenda item 14? No. Well, thank you for your report, and I will let you carry on with your verbal presentation.
Okay, a verbal presentation indeed. Sadly, it won't be as exciting as Daisy's. No pictures of crawfish. It's probably a little bit dry, but what it is this was something that we have done with a couple of the other IFCA committees. It's really just sort of a whistle-stop tour of the habitat regulations assessments, which are integral to the DEFRA's revised approach. So it's a little bit of a refresher, and I guess it's sort of quite pertinent to ourselves, because the assessments will be forthcoming imminently, I guess. So it was really just something that I offered to do and was happy to do. I've only put together 10 or so charts, so hopefully I won't take too long. Please just ask any questions as I go along. And I will make no further excuses for the dryness of the legislation. Okay, so I'm going to begin by just giving a bit of context to DEFRA's revised approach. I suspect you are all familiar with it, but that is the context for then talking through what a habitats regulations assessment is and the key components of it. Yes, so DEFRA's revised approach to fisheries, a major project launched in summer 2012, essentially a programme to bring commercial fisheries management within European marine sites into line with the management of all other industries that operate within those sites, industries and activities. As we know, MMO and IFCA are principal delivery leads, and then there is an implementation group that's essentially the rest of the statutory nature conservation bodies, DEFRA, fishing industry, and also the environmental NGOs that meet quarterly. The overall objectives, most of you will be familiar with the matrix that Steve has displayed at previous committee meetings, essentially a colour-coded risk assessment of fisheries and their overlap with protected features of European marine sites. And the objectives were for high-risk red flagged activities to be managed by the end of 2013, and that's in place. And then amber and green risks, and also the offshore sites, to be managed by the end of 2016. DEFRA's preference in the policy paper around this is that those assessments for these amber and green risks are done in a consistent way with Article 6.3 of the Habitats Directive, and i.e. that means using Habitats Regulations Assessment, and that's the context for the refresher, if you like. I won't go into detail here, you all know this, but the red risks in Isles of Scilly have been addressed by the Fishing Gear Permits Bylaw, which has prohibited all bottom-towed trawling inside the Isles of Scilly complex, except for one light otter trawl, which is able to operate over sediment, which is actually classified as an amber. So a site-specific assessment, HRA, was done on that activity, and it was consented to. We're now at the amber-green assessment stage for the remainder of the interactions in the European marine site, and also the SPA bird features, and plus the management priority risks for the MCZs. And Natural England continues to work in partnership with the Isles of Scilly to complete this work. Okay. So habitat regulations assessment. I suppose just by starting off, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but am I talking to people that understand habitat regulations assessment? Am I preaching to be converted? See some nods and some not. So okay, I'll take a little bit of license and just walk you through what I've prepared. Okay, so the habitats regulations, or HABS regs as we call them, we work with them all the time at Natural England, is essentially a piece of legislation, the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2010, which was a consolidation of the original habitat regulations of 1994. What this piece of legislation did was basically transpose the two main pieces of environmental legislation at EU level, the Habitats Directive and the Birds Directive, into UK law. The HABS regs apply as a matter of law in all European marine sites and as a matter of government policy in Ramsar sites and potential or candidate European sites. I've outlined there sort of the main provisions of what habitat regulations provide for, so it's the designation and management of European marine sites and monitoring of European marine sites, not just marine sites, of all European sites, terrestrial as well. Habitats regulations assessment essentially deals with this part of the process, so the assessment of plans or projects, whether or not they can go ahead in a European site.
Could I just quickly add, plan or project sounds a bit grandiose, but fishing activity is recognised as a plan or project.
Yes. Plan or project is the wording of the directive, which I've pulled out here, so it does sound grandiose, because it's, if you like, it's the legalese. So I think, Steve, you've showed this already in the past as well. I think I was here 2 committees ago. This is the wording of Regulation 61 of the HABS regs, which basically talks about the need for a competent authority, essentially any public body providing a consent or permission, to conduct a habitats regulations assessment. I'll not read it to you, I'm sure you can all read. The important points there is that there's a screening process of likely significant effect. So first of all, there's a course judgment of whether or not an activity is likely to have an impact on a European marine site, and if it is likely to have an impact, then it must go to the next stage and have a more thorough assessment, which is called an appropriate assessment.
Something really important in here that we need to accept as an IFCA is that as we're the competent authority, we have to own the HRA. We have to completely believe what's in there, and we have to own it and be willing to stand by it. And I think that's really important on the basis of what the IFCA is and what it does. Because I think it can be easy for us to think, the HRA is somebody else's thing. That's for Natural England or whoever. It's not. We are the competent authority. We own it. It's our responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Natural England is sometimes the competent authority for when we're doing plans or projects within European marine sites, which we sometimes do with restoration projects or things like that. Okay. There's a provision within the legislation that Natural England must be consulted at the appropriate assessment stage. And then Article 5 of Regulation 61 basically says that an authority shall only agree to a plan or project having ascertained that it will not adversely affect the integrity of the European site. I'll do a little bit more on each of these. I've just pulled out here Article 6. We talk about Article 6 within the scope of the revised approach, and that's because the revised approach is, if you like, European-driven. Article 6.3 is the same as Regulation 6.1 of the HABS regs, so this is the transposition into European law. Okay, I do have a diagram, so that is something. HRA is basically, I believe HRA isn't actually a term within the legislation, but it's a generic term that we use to cover the sequential and legal steps that the regulations outline that must be gone through. And very crudely, essentially, we need to determine, is it a plan or project? If so, yes. Is it necessary for the management of the site? So if it's actually something that is of conservation benefit and directly related to furthering the conservation objectives of the site, then it doesn't need to progress further. But everything else does, every other sort of licensable commercial activity, for example. Is it necessary for the management of the site? Yeah, permission may be granted. Go no further. Is it likely to have a significant effect on features of the site? If no, then permission may be granted at that stage, and that's what we call, if you like, a simple LSE assessment, and a number of the matrix combinations may end up at this stage. If we do determine that there is likely to be a significant effect, then we have to do the appropriate assessment, which basically is a more involved process, and I'll talk a bit more on the following chart. That then determines whether or not that plan or project will have an adverse effect on the integrity of the site. So the legislation does talk about needing to consult Natural England. There is no formal sort of mandatory requirement to consult Natural England on the likely significant effect stage, but it's encouraged that that's done. But there is a requirement to consult Natural England at the appropriate assessment stage. And so, principally, that element is the bit that we're involved with. There is then a set of derogations which sometimes allow plans or projects to proceed even if they are going to have adverse effects. And that is essentially a Secretary of State decision, usually for large infrastructure projects that are of important public interest. And the tests here are, is there any other way that this plan or project could be delivered and not have an adverse effect on a European marine site? I.e., could it be done somewhere else? Can you build that power station not in a European marine site? No. Is there an overriding public interest here that it should progress even though that it's having an environmental impact? And if that is determined, then it can be consented. Just a couple of sort of points to pull out about the main components here. So the likely significant effect test, essentially, as I said, it's a core screening exercise. We really don't expect there to be a lot of work here. It's really sort of based on some general evidence or general understanding of an activity and whether or not it's likely to have an effect on a protected feature. And the reason why it's so coarse is because European case law has actually made it a pretty low bar for something to be a likely significant effect. The word likely is not interpreted as likely in European law, it's actually may. So if it even may, or we're not sure, then we determine likely significant effect. It's only if we're absolutely certain. And we don't need to progress further.
Rob, is that where the precautionary principle applies then?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's essentially, yes.
Same thing.
The European Court applying the precautionary principle in a case. This is an important piece of case law. The Wadensee judgment. It was a cockle fishery somewhere in Holland. That's right. And significant essentially means, is it likely to undermine the conservation objectives of the features of the site? The appropriate assessment, and we get a lot of questions about appropriate assessment. How thorough does it need to be? What's appropriate in terms of an appropriate assessment? Essentially, appropriate assessment is just an objective sort of rationale, looking at all the evidence that's available. And the important point here is best available scientific knowledge. We're not expecting huge data collection to fill every single gap. Decisions can be made based on best available evidence. Obviously, what scientific evidence lets you do is make less precautionary decisions in some instances, because in the absence of scientific evidence, you tend to have to apply the precautionary principle. We've talked about the requirement to consult Natural England, and appropriate essentially means fit for purpose. So if we're looking at complex interactions, multiple interactions between an activity and protected features, then it's likely to have a more thorough assessment. If it's simple interactions that are well understood, then it can be a shorter document. What it's not, though, is a full EIA of every possible impact. It is very much just focused on those features of the sites that may...
I'm assuming if you were going to something quite big and complex, say in a renewable energy park, the RCC in one of your tracks, then you would insist on a full EIA
Yes.
as an outcome of nature.
Absolutely. And the EIA regulations have their own set of criteria of when an EIA must be done, and it's based on scale of the proposal. The other sort of, I suppose one of the key components of habitat regulation assessment is that it allows for or demands the assessment of activities in combination with other activities. And the principal reason for this is to stop the sort of death by 1,000 cuts to a protected site. Lots of small things which don't individually have an adverse effect on the site integrity, but when taken together, either over a short period of time or over a long period of time, actually then do. And so that's the in combination assessment. It's basically there for every plan or project to be considered. Could this have an effect when combined with other things that we know about happening within that site?
It's a very similar approach to highways agency takes roads. So you'll have lots of developments around a junction, say, and there'll come a point where the highways agency will say you cannot do any more development in that area because the cumulative effect means that you can't use it anymore. So it's exactly the same principle you use in transport planning, for example. So it's quite a well-used principle.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of an example that might apply to the revised approach work here. I looked at the matrix, and green interactions on the matrix are essentially ones that are flagged as they're not likely to have a significant effect in their own, but they should be considered in combination with other things if they're going on. And for example, commercial diving activity was one of these over sediment habitats. Unlikely to have any real impact, but if there's other things going on overlapping with an activity like that, then they can be assessed.
Sorry, Rob. Just a quick question. Has it been confirmed yet? Because when I asked Natural England about this last workshop I was at, it wasn't clear. These activities, are these purely commercial or commercial and recreational? Especially when we start going on to like green with push net shrimping. Those sort of, you're not going to get any commercial activity on that. That's purely going to be recreational, but you're still going to have the same sort of impact of 500 hobbyists walking around a beach pushing some shrimps.
I think there's no sort of formal decision on that. DEFRA's position is that the revised approach is commercial fisheries only. One particular, I wasn't aware of that grey area, if you like, but it's similar to bait digging, for example, where
that's the other one, bait digging.
Bait digging is the big one that's being discussed all the time, because you can't actually tell when an activity is commercial or recreational, and some of the recreational activities are of commercial scale. So ultimately it will be a decision for the IFCA on whether that needs assessing based on the scale of it.
I'm pretty certain, Rob, that no one in the IFCA would want to ban any amateur shrimping.
We want to stay alive.
Yeah, it won't happen.
Okay, the last point there is just that Natural England, we're advising that as best practice that when conducting these HRAs for the revised approach that fishing and other activities are considered, but ultimately that is a decision for the IFCA. And then the conclusion of the appropriate assessment is the integrity test. This is where the authority must be certain that there will be no adverse impacts. There's a really high bar here, and again, the case law was the most relevant case law was the Rivense judgment, which concluded that the authority can only consent to plan or project where no reasonable scientific doubt remains as to the absence of such effects. So basically, where we're sure. And then the last chart that I have was about the derogations, and I think I've already talked through these. These are the exceptional circumstances where the Secretary of State may decide that even though there are adverse effects, that because of imperative reasons of overriding public interest, and because that project can't go ahead anywhere else, he will consent that, or she will consent that. And in such cases, the Habitats Directive requires compensatory measures, and what they are usually are habitat creation of areas of equivalent scale and ecological value for that which is lost, to make sure that the coherence of the European site network is maintained. So thank you. We had a lot of questions as we went along, but yeah, if you do have any further questions, please let me know. Okay. And I hope that was useful.
Rob, can you let me have a copy of your slides?
I will send those to you.
Perfect.
And if any other member would like some copy of them slides, we can sort that out as well.
Yeah, and so make them available
right.
to the committee. Exactly.
As the chairman, or the new elected chairman, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your time, your effort that you've put into this IFCA, and I wish you all the best for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, everyone. And yes, I may be back at some point.
Good. It'd be nice to see you back. Agenda item 15, the MPA survey work. I'll hand you over to the Chief Fisheries Officer.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Again, this is really a summary rather than a particular report on that needs a decision, but it's really a review of where we are right now. As you can see, the main part really is the intended outcomes of a project from 2.2 onwards about what we have to do regarding the MPA survey. And this is all connected with the appropriate assessments and the HRA, which Rob's just gone through. We have to do the evidence collection before we can move forward onto any further assessments. So this is what this particular survey is all about. And I've split it into in 2.2 about the project objectives, what we need to do to start with. I've already started this, incidentally. I've been doing the analysing available literature and ongoing studies. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that is the rough timetable of our itinerary, rather, of what we need to do. Then 2.3 explains about the scope of the project, physical impacts of potting on benthic habitat. Benthic, by the way, is bottom-living stuff, and species. Also may also consider different components, for instance, pots, ropes, gears, and anchors, and so on, and also different pot types, which I dragged out of one particular review I saw. At the moment, nationally, very few primary evidence sources that specifically look at physical impact of potting, which is, it's not unusual, but I would have thought there might have been more around. There are quite a few reports comparing trawled areas with potted areas, but very few that consider the impacts of potting on its own. So that's basically the national picture. Now, 2.5 explains very quickly what the study here in Scilly will include: undertaking underwater video, dive surveys, which are already underway, in order to investigate and bring up evidence charts on the impact of potting on reef habitats and so on. And in the attachments, there are 4 there: Gap Point, North Harbour, Smith Sound, and so on. What I've done, and many thanks to Tim and his team from the Marine Department of the University of Plymouth, recorded what was down on those particular sites. In fact, I've got a 5th one now as well, which I've only just been given, so that's why you haven't got it yet. Took me half a morning, or a whole morning actually, to work out all the Latin names, because some of them were spelt wrong, and some weren't even properly connected, but never mind. Anyway, that's where we are so far, and I think Tim has got wants to come in on that one, didn't Tim?
So one slight correction there, Steve. The team I had in April to do some of these, although we were sort of like advised by Professor Hill, it wasn't really the University of Plymouth. There was, the team was made up of, from Plymouth, but also from the Plymouth Marine Labs, and we had the head coordinator of Sea Search Southwest as well. So there was a little bit of wasn't just to do with the Plymouth. So I thought I'd mention that. Do you want me to?
Yes, you would.
Right. Okay.
I was going to ask. This looks really good, but the analysis you've done of the surveys that are out there. Are we using similar techniques or different techniques? I'm not sure what the...
It's every every technique is the same, except one which I'll explain why that was. We're using it so it's repeatable. So there's a GPS point at the beginning, there's a piton in the
bit like quadrats, when you do quadrats.
Exactly the same, and there is a, given in Steve's write-up, there's a compass direction exactly where to go to the end of the 10-metre line, and it's a 4 to 5 metre wide video running down one side of the line, up the other, which then can be repeated in years to come. The only exception was the site that we did in Shipman Head, where we found all the sunset corals. Because of the nature and the delicacy of the site, it wasn't thought appropriate to sort of stick piton in and use lines to go around. And considering that there was only one solid bit of rock and everything else was boulders, anyone repeating it has only got to look for the solid bit of rock and there's nothing else there. So that one was slightly different, because we thought we'd do some damage if we start dragging lines across sunset corals. So we stopped that one. Up on the screen here is where I am now today, and where we are now. The blue circles are where we've got historic still photographs of wide-angle reefs, which have now been, or have been repeated. So we've got a reasonable geographical spread starting with those. A little bit more to do. There are places we haven't got to yet. And where the red crosses are where we've achieved these video sites, which are now 5 of them. And the quality is such that, and without boring you too long with this, we'll run a small example at Goo Reef, where the quality is such where you can actually identify very small individual creatures there along the video site. This one is, the habitat is high energy reef, mainly plumose and enemies, but if you look closely in amongst the video, there is absolutely loads of things. Every site my learned friends that were with us did a species list for the whole site. It's obviously a shame that people who are marine biologists can't spell. Sorry about that, Steve. But nevertheless, they did do a complete video of the site, and I did a complete video, and they've done a species list for the whole area. Came on behind and did that, and. But as you can see, it's very identifiable and it would be repeatable. Even the odd movable critter comes along. So, without going through all the species there. And if I stop that one, just a quick example of another one we did. This is actually, this is why I flagged up with Rob earlier, because this is exactly where unfortunately, this is exactly where in Gap Point, where this, I last saw this pipeline, but and that's a fragile sponge habitat rather than low energy fragile sponge habitat rather than a high energy one on the last. And again, when you look at the screen, it doesn't come up so well here. You can identify every individual creature on there. In a moment, you start to see some of the sunset corals have just gone by on the screen, and in a moment we come to the second colony, which we're just coming into in a moment. Cluster anemones at the top, and then as I duck into the slightly turn the lights into the darkness, we get another taste of the sunset corals. The visibility on that day was reasonably grim, actually. So, but there again, you'll get a good picture here of the sunset corals as we turn the corner. So that sort of gives a general idea of what we can do and what the quality is of the of the update where someone can slow that down and freeze frame and whatever and identify everything along that line, north and south of it.
I think the quality is excellent.
We're using wide-angle lens and 5,000 candle power of wide-angle video lights as well, so it's fairly severe. I was just going to ask, have we got anywhere, Doug, with the deep water?
No, yeah, we're waiting on some good weather, the right tides. We need to do it in neat tides, and we need some. It can't be raining, stuff like that. It can't be windy. We can't have ground sea. So we're waiting on some.
Can I come in on there and just say that the sooner we get the weather, make it of utmost importance to get on with that.
Yeah.
I think if we need it, we need it. So the sooner we can, when there's a gap, if we can get on with that, I'd appreciate it. Yeah.
There's some of those sites, Doug, I can advise you on if we have a little chat sometime, because some of those, providing it's an offshore wind, the swell won't affect it, nor will the tide. So we can some of them, you're right, absolutely, it needs neat tides and no swell, and some won't be so vital. So I'll talk to you about that again then, and we'll keep that moving on. Okay.
Great.
Diana, did you?
No, only to say, I think I just...
Have we got any more questions on this one?
Was that was your video footage? Was that SD or HD?
That's HD.
Well, I'd just like to say, when you look at footage like that, it just goes to show what effort and how much work is put into it. And I commend them, I really do. I mean, the recommendation here is to consider the progress of the MPA survey work. And can we have a proposer for that, please? Seconder? All those in favour? Some wonderful work going on there, I must say. Right, if we move on now to 16, the MMO report, I'll hand you over to Colin May.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I know bass is not close to your heart, so I'll keep it brief. Recreational fisheries, no more than 3 specimens per day. There are catch quota limits per vessel on a monthly basis. That's been discussed this month. I'm looking at a minimum conservation reference size of 42 centimetres. And that'll be voted in July. I'll leave it at that. Something closer to your heart is the peer work that Kier is undertaking on your behalf to increase your quality of life. We have received the variation requests from the Cornwall County Council, and we went and spoke to Mr. Dolby, who's the project manager from here today, who took us down his proposed engineering resolution to the issue with regards to the oily sediment just on the outboard side of the beach, shall we say. And he's provided pictures of that as well. It's about 1,200 millimetres down where he was digging up against the seawall. It might not be as bad. What they're trying to do is establish the rock strata base, which they're going to drill down onto with a camera to just check, see what's in there. And then, if that's suitable, the proposal is to pile it and then put on a sort of concrete base, bonded with other chemicals, shall we say. I didn't quite write everything down, but it's in the larger sort of document. And then build concrete up against that. There'll be a sewage treatment plant built into that as well, and they intend to use the backfill from Port Lowell Beach in on there, properly wrapped in subsea bags, non-biodegradable. There is a lower layer which is going to be used for the base for actually doing the drilling in.
I'll just come in on just while you did all the stuff on Porthlow Bank. You mean the sand that was dredged? Yeah, and that'll be okay for backfill.
It's called dredging material now. It's referred to. They're actually having scientific tests on it to make sure that there's no contaminant in there. Right. I can reassure you that when I was engaged by the Isles of Scilly Council to engage with the MMO HQ with regards to this marine licence, particularly when there was rumour that the dredged material sat on Port Lowe would have been used to backfill and also to be spread around spare beaches, which is against European law, to my knowledge. And the grain type for backfill in the 23-metre extension piece isn't suitable to do that in engineering terms. So to reduce the carbon footprint, they've really looked at the conduit they have with regards to that sort of previous sort of contaminated area and come up with an engineered solution, shall we say. They will put a membrane in to maintain the integrity of the subsea bags they're putting in, and there will be about a 5 or 10 millimetre gap in some parts of that concrete wall that spreads all the way up to the corner. And it's in their interest to make sure that has the integrity is required in order to support the top capping of concrete, which was explained to us today in great detail.
Can I, Amanda, a question?
Yeah, just, unless I'm missing a trick here, I understood that the material at Port Lowe had been contaminated and therefore there was some doubt about whether it could be reused. Are you telling me that that is no longer the case?
The MMO, the main licensing team in Newcastle, are looking at that. But the report I have seen today states that it's no longer an issue with regards to the 23-metre extension, but as a backfill in the new, I think it's a turning area.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be okay. But they await further scientific tests from the dredged material.
Yeah, no, it all sounds very hypothetical to me at the minute, but yeah. I mean, yeah.
It does. But I'm not here to judge the standard of their engineering. What I'm here for is in my capacity as a fisheries officer and what that environmental effect would have on your fisheries within the IFCA's powers and area of jurisdiction. We believe that providing they do the engineering that they have discussed today, that I think the effect on your fisheries will be negligible.
Yeah, I think what's key is that it will be sealed within the quay widening. So it won't be exposed to the environment, it won't be taken out and dumped as dredge material at sea, it won't have any of those things done to it, which would potentially cause us concern as an IFCA. It's about it being sealed in a safe manner inside the quay widening.
Foundations are a bit like the best laid plans, aren't they? I hope it's a very good membrane.
That's agreed, because I did ask that question. You know, can you provide me reassurance that that will not be contaminated in any way? The base of sand that they're going to pile into is already contaminated with quite some serious oily deposits. We can perhaps surmise that it sunk to the rock strata and then ran down into this pool where they were digging at the deepest point. I cannot say for certain. I'm not an engineer. But the top cover of sediment is over 1 metre thick, and it hasn't moved or gone through the layers back up to the surface. It's quite heavy. There's also alleged to be traces of asbestos, but where that's originated from, no one can say.
Maybe some of us have some ideas on that, but there you are.
Not for me to say, but I am of the opinion that providing they carry out what they intend to do to the letter, your fisheries should remain as clean as they are now, and unaffected.
On that note, does somebody affect the role of a kind of watching brief on it?
Yeah, they're to conduct themselves in accordance with the licence conditions.
I'm sure.
It's all been checked at MMOHQ with their engineering consultants.
That side I'm sure of it, but I'm thinking more of at the time when it happens at this end, if somebody is keeping an eye on it.
This end, I have no opinion on the Isles of Scilly's Council's engagement with it. That's up to the Isles of Scilly to do. Nothing to do with me. But I do know that Cornwall County Council, their project manager is overseeing it on behalf of the Duchy.
Well, it is a project between Cornwall Council and the Duchy, so I was just hoping there'd be some sort of
main contractor.
monitoring arrangement.
Yeah, all we can do is encourage Cornwall Council's project manager to ensure that Kier stick to their method statements, and if we understand what those method statements are and we see them deviating, at that point we can contact Cornwall Council and their project manager and say, we're concerned they're deviating from their method statement, please can you check?
Yeah, my point is, who is actually checking whether they're deviating or not?
That has to be the Cornwall Council's role. They are the project owners, they're responsible for the project, and if something goes pear-shaped, it will be down to Cornwall Council.
Yes, unfortunately they don't actually live and work here to put up with the
Okay, moving on. Prosecution. We recently prosecuted an Irish dam trawler for an excess of £7,000 including costs, and more recently detained a French fishing vessel who had been aboard at sea by the Royal Navy. On inspection, when we detained him alongside in Plymouth, I found that she had also breached technical conservation measures and awarded a fixed penalty to the value of £7,000 English. So we are continuing to maintain as much compliance as we're able to with the staff we have available at present, in which I'd like to introduce Danny Poulding, who's now our Senior Marine Officer at Penzance. Thanks for coming, Danny, and supporting me in these 2 days, supporting the IFCA. It is of note that another 5 Marine officers will be requested for the Southwest Marine area, and that sort of recruiting will be a nationwide campaign amongst other areas across England, and we hopefully would have them in place by year end, which is going to be very beneficial in dealing with the amount of work that we attract. The Fisheries Stakeholder Panel, considering matters related to fisheries management in England, and then also through the implementation of the reformed Common Fisheries Policy. Because of closure key stocks last year, particularly skates and rays, the MMO committed to getting together a stakeholder panel to talk more in depth about the challenges we face and how we can best use the available quota that we have and make sure it's fairly distributed and equitable. There was also an understanding that we need to balance the needs of individual fishermen, targeting maximum uptake without overshooting. Following these meetings, the panel have agreed to issue a joint newsletter to industry covering the topics that they discuss and any points for communication, which I feel that will only enhance reputation and credibility of the stakeholder panel. A number of organisations are involved in that, NMO primarily, the NFO, NUTFA and LIFE, and there's a guy called Cormac Burke, who you might know, who was the former editor of the Fishing News. So it's a strong professional cross-section. The change to commercial trawl selectivity measures in the Celtic Sea, that's gone in there to protect more juvenile fish, and those measures were rushed in at the end of May, and we had to act towards that. Quite a few Scottish scallopers in the areas, so might be good to have a couple of patrols dug, keep an eye on the integrity of your 6 nautical mile limit. That's it, pending your questions, Chairman.
Any questions for Colin? No? Well, the recommendation is to accept the report, the proposer and a seconder. Those in favour, thank you for your report, Colin. And a welcome to Danny. Hopefully we'll see you again sometime. Right, wonderful. Agenda item 17, joint working party with the Marine Management Organisation. I'll hand you over to the Chief Sea Fisheries Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. As you were at the meeting in London on Tuesday, you know a little bit about this, probably more than most members. There is a drive at the moment for DEFRA, the MMO, for savings, as you know, from an earlier report I did. It's called, what they're looking for, DEFRA is looking for a culture of cooperation driven by cost savings. So you can take from that what you wish. It does sound painful. And
they'd like to start with a blank sheet.
Well, that was one expression made by John Tuckett, who is the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of the MMO. He actually said that we want to start with a blank sheet, which shocked a few members of few IFCA officers, because they could see it as a potential merger in the future. And in fact, this is something that Eddie Derriman, who we had dinner with the other night, he forecast 5 years ago that there would be an eventual merger. At the moment, it's a long way from that, but what DEFRA are trying to do is push this forward as fast as possible. It's a very, very short deadline. They wanted agreement on recommended options for joint working by July the 15th. That has presented all sorts of problems to the IFCAs because, as you know, some of the IFCA funding is raised from local authority levies. And because they meet at different times throughout the year and budget setting doesn't start to take place until the autumn, we can't really go much further with that. I note also, and I've done some bit of research on this today, since 2011, the MMO budget in general has been reduced by 20%. So this is an indication of the pressure that the MMO and the IFCAs and DEFRA are all under at the moment. Basically, the bottom line is DEFRA looking at way of saving money in order to justify the cuts, and so someone's come up with a very bright idea of joint working, enforcement, which we do to an extent together with the MMO here, is one area. Shared premises is another. Shared resources such as computer and so on and so forth are other areas which are being looked at. Very, very short deadline. I don't think it will affect us a great deal here, in particular, because we work fairly closely with the MMO anyway, and we do this joint working. For instance, if we want to do outside 6 miles, then you come over and, as long as the weather's fit, of course, then it can be done. So we already do quite a bit of joint working. The RBS that Doug mentioned earlier, the terrestrial checking of and monitoring of fish purchasing, is also something which we've been doing together for 2 or 3 years. So in that sense, it shouldn't make a huge amount of difference. The only problems that the IFCAs have got at the moment is identifying options for cost saving, because we haven't been given specific detail on the level of the cuts or the duration of the cuts, because that's another something else to look at as well, and how it may be divided up between the two organisations or how it might fit in with the local authority funding model. So it's all academic at the moment, but they therefore are insisting on driving it forward, very short deadlines, and it will probably be part of the working party to look at the future IFCA funding. Almost certainly it'll be on the agenda, because there is a connection between the various elements.
From my perspective, I think we need to see this as an opportunity, not a threat. In that I think that there's we've done some really successful joint working, but I think there's lots more work that we can do together where we pool our resources to have a much bigger bang for our buck, whatever that buck may be. And it seems to me that there's a real opportunity where we don't, if we look at it from the other end of the telescope and not look at it as being about saving money, but look at it at how we can actually do more together, I think then if there's cost savings, that's a great thing. But more importantly, we'll do what we do better. And I think if we look at it that way, I think we can see it as an opportunity rather than a threat, because I think the language that you've spoken there, which I think is probably a reflection of what many of the other chief officers are feeling, I think is much more seeing this as this is my empire and I don't want my empire invaded into. Whereas I think we're small enough that actually our empire is so tiddly that actually we'd quite like to engage much more broadly. And I think that, for me, is a real opportunity. And I think we should embrace it as such.
Yeah, no, I quite agree, Chairman. In fact, it was emphasised by all the chief officers that we should look at it positively and not negatively. And so what you've said is exactly the route that we're going down.
Have we got any questions on this, Doug?
I was just going to say, with the joint workings, like what Dinah said, is a lot of other districts don't like other people coming in, but like we welcome it over here. Like I've done workings with the Navy and that, and I know like Cornwall hate the Navy coming inside their six. They prefer them to keep them out, but I'm more than happy to work alongside the Navy. We just get tied up with the Navy. The only downside is MMO Newcastle, some little bean counter up there that likes to be informed, and it just slows the matter down a bit. But generally what happens is I just talk to the captains directly and just crack on, and we just go out and do it, make it happen. So, but yeah, welcome that completely.
Can I just add to that, John? We're very lucky in the southwest marine area that we've got a very strong relation, have done for many years, with the Devon IFCA, the Cornwall IFCA, and the Isles of Scilly IFCA. And I've recently taken up the post of senior marine officer at Penzance, and we're having now weekly meetings to plan joint enforcement with the Cornwall IFCA, and I want to try and improve what is already a strong relationship with Doug by keeping communication as regular as possible, and build on what is already a very good working relationship.
Yeah. I think it's all positive and we're going in the right direction. That's how I see it.
I'm going to add to that it goes on to say that to find and develop opportunities for joint working with a view to delivering efficiencies and savings for central government. Your work should initially focus on the scoping of cost options with co-enforcement and asset sharing as the core.
Thank you for that. Right, well, I think we can all consider the opportunities of the joint. We've got a proposal and a seconder for that. Those in favour? Thank you very much. Part 2, reports for information only. There's nothing in Part 3. Thank you all for attending, and I'll close the meeting at 8:25.